Becoming a landlord is supposed to be a smart move, right? A path to financial freedom, a way to build something that lasts. But nobody ever warns you that sometimes the biggest threat to your investment isn't a deadbeat tenant, a busted pipe, or a flooded basement. Sometimes the monster you have to fight lives in the pristine clubhouse and communicates through crisp white envelopes. My homeowners association didn't just find me. They waged a psychological war. They harassed my tenant, a single mom just trying to build a life. They pushed me, prodded me, and backed me into a corner with their ridiculous rules and endless fines. They genuinely believed they could bully me into submission, that I would just roll over and sell the property at a loss. What they didn't count on was that their petty tyranny would ignite a spark of creative desperation in me. They forced me to cook up a wild, meticulously crafted bluff, a bluff so audacious they were far too arrogant and self-important to see it coming. By the time they realized what was really happening, it was already over. Their entire board was facing a full-blown community revolt. They were forced to issue a public apology, and it all started with one insane, unbelievable letter about the color of a welcome mat. It all started with a simple, almost cliché, American dream. My wife and I had spent the better part of a decade working jobs that paid the bills, but didn't exactly feed the soul. We'd diligently saved every spare dollar, brown bagging lunches, and skipping lavish vacations, all with a single goal in mind: building a future for our kids that was more secure than our own. The stock market felt like a casino, a digital roulette wheel we had no control over. But real estate, that felt different. It felt real, tangible, solid. You could stand on it, fix it, and create a home. After months of scouring listings, attending open houses, and smelling more musty basements than I care to remember, we found it. The perfect starter investment. A charming two-bedroom townhouse in a community called Willow Creek. Even the name sounded peaceful and idyllic. When we first drove in, it was almost unnervingly perfect. The lawns were manicured with a geometric precision that bordered on the obsessive. Every house was painted from a pre-approved palette of coordinated muted colors, beiges, grays, and taupes, that blended into a seamless, if slightly bland, tapestry. The community pool sparkled, a perfect blue rectangle utterly devoid of a single floating leaf or, for that matter, any sign of human life. It was run by a homeowners association, but at the time, that seemed like a feature, not a bug. In my naivete, I thought an HOA was a good thing, a mechanism to protect property values and keep the neighborhood looking pristine. I pictured friendly neighborhood barbecues, well-organized community events, and a shared sense of pride. Looking back now, it's almost painful how innocent I was. I saw order and thought it meant harmony. I didn't understand that rigorous order requires a ruthless enforcer. Willow Creek wasn't a community. It was a meticulously curated diorama, and we had just bought a piece of it without realizing the curator was a despot. The house itself was wonderful. It had good bones, a small but private patio out back, and a solid, reliable feel that promised security. We spent the next month pouring our hearts, a good chunk of our savings, and countless hours of sweat equity into it. We ripped out the old carpets, refinished the hardwood floors until they gleamed, and painted every wall in a warm, inviting neutral. We updated the kitchen with modern fixtures and put in a new vanity in the bathroom. We wanted to create a place someone would truly love to call home. Finding a tenant was the next crucial step, and we felt like we'd won the lottery. Her name was Sarah, a single mom with a super bright and bubbly 7-year-old daughter named Lily. Sarah was a registered nurse at the local hospital, a profession that spoke volumes about her sense of responsibility and compassion. During the viewing, she fell in love with the place instantly. her eyes lighting up as she imagined Lily playing on the patio. We did a full background check, a non-negotiable step for any landlord, but especially critical in an HOA where you, the owner, are ultimately on the hook for your tenant's actions. Sarah passed with flying colors. Her references were glowing, her credit was solid, and her demeanor was nothing but kind and earnest. She was, in every sense of the word, the perfect tenant. The lease signing was a genuinely happy day. We sat at our dining room table, the documents spread out before us. We walked her through everything, including the comically large binder of HOA paperwork, the covenants, conditions and restrictions, or CC&Rs. As the landlord, it's my legal duty to provide these to the tenant, because the HOA holds the owner responsible for any rule-breaking, not the renter. I remember hefting the binder and joking about its weight. "Looks like they've got a rule for everything but the color of the sky," I chuckled. Sarah laughed and promised to be a model resident. She spoke about how excited Lily was to have a little patio space for her chalk drawings and to finally be in a place with a community pool for the summer. For the first 3 months, it was a dream. Rent was paid on time, every time. Sarah kept the place immaculate. She even sent me a picture of a cute little flower box she'd put on the patio, overflowing with vibrant petunias. We were officially landlords. The dream was real. We were succeeding. And then the first letter arrived. It was a crisp white envelope, deceptively thin, with the Willow Creek HOA logo embossed in a severe-looking all-caps font. I opened it casually, assuming it was a community newsletter about pool hours or a welcome packet. It was not. It was a notice of violation. My heart did a little nervous flutter. What could we have possibly done wrong? The property was perfect. The letter, written in cold, detached, bureaucratic language, stated that the property at 124 Willow Lane was in violation of Article 7, Section 4B of the CC&Rs. I scanned the page, looking for the infraction. The crime? The welcome mat. I had to read the sentence twice, then a third time, certain I was missing some crucial detail. Sarah's cheerful little home sweet home welcome mat was, and I quote directly, a non-compliant shade of beige. It was, apparently, a half-shade too dark, leaning more towards a sandy brown than the approved light taupe. The letter informed me that the approved color palette for all entryway mats was detailed on a sub-page of the HOA's website that I never knew existed. It was a specific, narrow range of lifeless, pale tones. The letter demanded we rectify the violation by removing the offending mat immediately or face a fine of $25 per day. I literally laughed out loud, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. This had to be a joke. It felt like a parody, the kind of ridiculous HOA story you read about on the internet. Surely this was the work of some overzealous new board member trying to make a name for themselves. I called Sarah, feeling a mix of amusement and embarrassment. "Hey, Sarah, you are not going to believe this." I explained the situation, and to her credit, she was more confused than annoyed. She apologized profusely, as if she had committed a genuine transgression by choosing a welcome mat. I told her not to worry, that it was utterly absurd, and I would handle it. Of course, being the conscientious person she was, she removed the mat immediately, leaving the front step bare, cold, and unwelcoming. My first email to the HOA was a model of politeness and barely concealed amusement. I introduced myself as the owner of the property, confirmed that the non-compliant mat had been removed, and then gently, almost playfully, asked if the precise color of a welcome mat was a matter that truly required a formal violation notice. I was trying to be friendly, neighborly. I figured a soft touch, a little bit of "We're all reasonable people here" charm would resolve this absurdity quickly. The reply I received a few hours later was, "Not." It came directly from one, Brenda Mulroney, HOA president. Ooh. There were no pleasantries, no "hello," no "thank you for your inquiry." It was a cold, digital slap in the face. It just said, "Mr. Thompson, compliance is not a matter of personal opinion. The rules are the rules. They are in place to maintain the aesthetic integrity and property values of our community. Future violations will not be met with such leniency. Please ensure your tenant familiarizes herself more thoroughly with the CC&Rs." The tone was so breathtakingly condescending, so utterly devoid of warmth or reason. Aesthetic integrity. That was the phrase they used to justify being petty tyrants. My attempt at being a friendly neighbor had been met with a brick wall of corporate speak and undisguised contempt. The dream was starting to feel a little tarnished. That sparkling pool and those perfect lawns suddenly seemed less like a community. Perk and more like the perfectly kept cage of a very angry and very meticulous zookeeper. I had no idea at the time, but that welcome mat wasn't the end of the story. It was just the opening shot in a war I never wanted to fight. Brenda and her board had just met me, but they'd already decided I was a problem. And they had a whole toolbox of fines and violations ready to hammer me into submission. After the great welcome mat fiasco of 2025, an unnerving quiet settled over Willow Creek. For a few weeks, the mailbox contained only junk mail and bills. No more crisp, white envelopes. No more icy emails from Brenda Mulroney. I started to allow myself a sliver of hope that it was just a one-time power trip, a bizarre hazing ritual for the new guy. But that hope was short-lived. It's as if Brenda had a sixth sense for the precise moment I started to relax, a predatory instinct for sniffing out contentment. The next notice arrived. This time, it was about the trash cans. Many HOAs have rules that you can't leave your trash cans out on the street, except on pickup day. That's reasonable. But Willow Creek's rule was hyper-specific. Bins could be placed at the curb no earlier than 6 p.m. the night before, and had to be removed from site no later than 6 p.m. on pickup day. Apparently, Sarah had left her bins at the curb until 9 p.m., 3 hours past the deadline. Brenda, or one of her board member spies, must have been patrolling the neighborhood with a stopwatch. The violation notice came with a $50 fine and a grainy, dramatically zoomed-in photo of the offending trash cans, time-stamped like evidence from a major crime scene. It was utterly ridiculous. I paid the fine, swallowing my frustration. As the landlord, I got hit with the fines directly. And then I had the deeply uncomfortable task of asking my tenant to reimburse me, which always puts a strain on an otherwise positive relationship. I explained it to Sarah, who was horrified. She was a nurse. Her shifts were long and notoriously unpredictable. That day, she had gotten held up at the hospital with a critical patient and simply didn't make it home in time. Any normal, empathetic person would understand that. But an HOA board isn't a normal person. It's a committee of them, and that somehow makes it infinitely worse. A week later, another envelope. This one was for a wind chime. Sarah had hung a small, tasteful bamboo chime on a hook on her back patio. The violation notice cited an obscure rule about auditory nuisances and claimed a neighbor had complained. The fine was $70. I called Sarah again, my voice tight with disbelief. She sounded defeated. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was a gift from my mom. I didn't even think. I'll take it down right away." She was a perfect tenant, being made to feel like a criminal over a wind chime. Then came the garden hose. Sarah had coiled it neatly on the hook next to the back patio spigot, but the violation notice stated it was a disorderly loop rather than the prescribed concentric circles. There was another photo, this time of the offending hose, looking perfectly normal to any sane human being. A $25 fine. This was followed by a notice about holiday decorations. Sarah had put up a string of orange lights and a friendly-looking ghost on her patio for Lily in mid-October. On November 2nd, a notice appeared, fining her $10 a day for unseasonal decorations left up past the holiday. The campaign of petty harassment was relentless. But the next major battle was over parking. Sarah drove a normal, well-kept Ford F-150 pickup truck. It was her only vehicle, practical for hauling her daughter's sports gear and for the occasional trip to the hardware store. One afternoon, she came out to find a bright orange, aggressively adhesive sticker slapped on her driver's side window. The adhesive was the malicious kind that refuses to come off cleanly, leaving a gummy, ugly residue that takes an hour and a bottle of Goo Gone to remove. The warning read, "Commercial-style vehicles are not permitted to be parked in driveways overnight." They were classifying her personal pickup truck as a commercial vehicle. This is one of those classic, insane HOA rules meant to preserve a certain look, as if a pickup truck would somehow shatter the fragile suburban illusion. This time, I decided to fight back, but with facts and logic. I dug out that monstrous binder of CC&Rs and spent an hour poring over the vehicle section. It clearly stated that commercial vehicles were defined as having commercial logos, ladder racks, external toolboxes, or a specific heavy-duty weight classification. Sarah's truck had none of those. It was a standard personal-use truck, identical to dozens of others in the city. I wrote a formal, meticulously polite letter to the board. I quoted the exact text from their own rules, paragraph and section number. I attached photos of Sarah's truck from every angle, demonstrating its complete lack of commercial features. I pointed out that they were misinterpreting their own governing policies and respectfully requested they remove the violation and the associated fine. The response I received was a masterclass in pretzel logic. Brenda wrote back that while the truck might not have logos, its model was a type that is often used for commercial purposes, and therefore its very presence in the driveway detracted from the neighborhood's residential aesthetic. She was literally inventing a new rule and applying it retroactively. They were graciously willing to waive the fine this one time, but they insisted the truck be parked in the garage from now on. This was a hollow victory. The garage was so small that the truck barely fit, leaving no room for her daughter's bicycle, a lawnmower, or anything else. It was infuriating. They were wrong. Their own documents proved they were wrong. But they didn't care. They held all the power. They just made up the rules as they went along, and my only choice was to obey or get buried in fines. Every month brought a new, petty complaint. A notice that the blinds in the bedroom weren't the approved shade of white. A warning because Sarah's daughter, Lily, had used sidewalk chalk on their own private patio. A complaint that the grass was, and I'm not kidding, a quarter of an inch too high. A formal violation because a delivery driver left a package on the front step and Sarah, working a 12-hour shift, didn't retrieve it within the HOA's 2-hour window for porch clutter. It was a non-stop campaign of targeted harassment. Sarah was constantly on edge, and I was spending hours every week documenting, photographing, and responding to this nonsense. I tried going to an HOA meeting. I figured if I could just talk to them face-to-face, as a reasonable human being, we could sort this out. The meeting was held in a cold, sterile clubhouse with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and vaguely ill. Brenda sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 other board members, a man who looked completely bored and a woman who looked completely terrified of her. I waited patiently for the open forum at the end. When it was finally my turn, I calmly introduced myself as the owner of 124 Willow Lane and tried to explain the series of unfair and inconsistent violations. I didn't even get 2 minutes into my prepared statement before Brenda cut me off. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with practiced condescension, "this is not a forum for personal grievances. We're here to discuss community business, like the color of the new petunias at the front gate. The rules are clear. If you or your renter find them too difficult to follow, then maybe Willow Creek isn't the right community for you. A few other homeowners shot me sympathetic glances, but nobody dared to speak up. They were all afraid of getting on Brenda's list. I was shut down, publicly humiliated, and dismissed like a child. The final straw, the moment, the polite, rule-following landlord in me died, and something much more cold and calculating took over, came about a month later. It was about a tree. A medium-sized oak tree in the little patch of grass behind the townhouse had a few branches hanging low over the back fence. I received a notice in the mail, but this one was different. It was an immediate action required notice with a $200 fine already attached. Violation: failure to maintain landscaping. Tree requires immediate trimming. I knew landlords were responsible for the maintenance of their own property, but something about this felt off. That tree wasn't in the tiny yard of the townhouse. It was behind it. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out the thick packet of documents I received at closing. I found the community plat map, the official survey document that shows property lines, easements, and common areas. My heart started beating faster as I spread it out on my desk. And there it was, in black and white. The tree, the one they were fining me $200 for, was not on my property. Its trunk was planted squarely in the greenbelt area behind the row of townhouses. It was an HOA common area. According to their own CC&Rs, the HOA is unequivocally responsible for the maintenance of all common areas. That means they were fining me for not trimming their own tree. This was it. I had them, dead to rights, with their own documents as the evidence. A surge of righteous, incandescent anger flooded through me. I scanned the plat map and the CC&R section about common area maintenance. I attached them to an email and sent it to Brenda and the entire board. My tone wasn't polite anymore. It was firm, factual, and cold. "Dear board members," I wrote, "please see the attached plat map and the relevant excerpt from the CC&Rs regarding common area maintenance. The tree in question is located on HOA common property. Therefore, maintenance is the HOA's responsibility, per your own governing documents, Article 9, Section 2. The $200 fine was issued in error and must be rescinded immediately. Furthermore, the tree needs to be trimmed by the HOA's landscapers in a timely manner to prevent any actual hazard." I leaned back in my chair, a grim, triumphant smile on my face. "Checkmate, Brenda." Her response came the next morning. It was the single most arrogant, infuriating, and power-drunk email I have ever read in my life. She didn't even acknowledge the mountain of evidence I had provided. She wrote, "Mr. Thompson, the board's decision is final. The tree's branches are encroaching upon your property's airspace, which makes it your responsibility to address them. The fine stands. If it is not paid within 15 days, we will add a late fee and begin the process of placing a lien on your property. We consider this matter closed." My blood ran cold, then hot. A lien. They were threatening to take my property, my family's investment, my kids' future, all because they were too arrogant to admit they had made a mistake. They were bullies who broke their own rules to terrorize people, and they had just pushed me too far. Something inside me snapped. The years of polite negotiation, of trying to be the reasonable one, of swallowing my anger, evaporated in an instant. The frustration boiled over into a cold, hard resolve. No more letters. No more polite emails. No more playing their game. Brenda wanted the matter closed? Fine. I was about to open up a whole new one. She thought she was dealing with a pushover landlord. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. As I stared at her email, its smug finality mocking me, a crazy, beautiful, and dangerous idea started to form. They wanted to play hardball? Game on. For 2 full days, I did nothing. I let Brenda's email sit there, a digital monument to her own hubris. I didn't respond. I didn't pay the fine. I didn't panic. I planned. Now, I'm not a lawyer, But my day job for over a decade had been in corporate purchasing, negotiating massive contracts with global suppliers far more intimidating than a suburban HOA board. It was a world of leverage, liability, and reading the fine print until your eyes blurred. I learned how to dissect a contract to find its weaknesses, how to anticipate an opponent's moves, and most importantly, how to spot their deepest fears. And an HOA, for all its bluster, is just a small-time, non-profit corporation, usually run by amateurs who get drunk on the tiniest sip of power, but have no idea how to handle real, professional pressure. And like any corporation, they have vulnerabilities. First, I weaponized my research skills. I spent an entire Saturday doing a deep dive into the public records of the Willow Creek HOA. I started on the county clerk's website, 13 pulling their original articles of incorporation and all subsequent amendments. Then I found the HOA's public portal, a clunky, terribly designed website that looked like it was made in 1998. I systematically downloaded every PDF I could find. Budgets from the last 5 years, monthly meeting minutes for the last 2 years, annual reports, and every single word of their CC&Rs and bylaws. I read it all. And buried deep in the dry, boring numbers and procedural notes, I found it. Tucked away in their financials were 2 critical details. First, their operating budget was incredibly tight, with almost no cash reserve set aside for unexpected legal expenses. A single lawsuit, even one they won, could be financially ruinous. Second, I found the line item for their directors' and officers' insurance premiums, the D&O policy that protects board members like Brenda from being sued personally for their actions. Those premiums had jumped by 30% in the last 2 years. I cross-referenced that with the meeting minutes and found my golden ticket. A brief, sanitized mention of a settled dispute with a former homeowner over a fence issue. This told me everything. They were financially fragile, and the board members were personally terrified of lawsuits. That fear was my leverage. Now, for the bluff itself, I couldn't just threaten to sue them as myself. They'd see me as just one angry homeowner, do a cost-benefit analysis, and call my bluff. Assuming I couldn't afford a protracted and expensive legal battle, they were probably right. I needed something bigger, something that would trigger their deepest corporate fears. I needed to create an opponent they couldn't bully, an impersonal entity that spoke their own soulless language of liability and fiduciary duty. That night, for about $150.20 on a state government website, Apex Property Group, LLC, was born. It was a completely real limited liability company, legally registered with the state. I spent another $20 on a cheap website builder and, using a generic template, created a simple but brutally professional-looking one-page site for Apex. It was all stock photos of glass skyscrapers, diverse teams shaking hands in conference rooms, and corporate buzzwords like strategic real estate acquisition, maximizing community asset value, and fiduciary-focused community partnerships. It was a meaningless word salad, intentionally designed to be both intimidating and utterly boring. It looked exactly like the kind of faceless institutional investment firm that buys up properties by the dozen and couldn't care less about your feelings or the color of your welcome mat. The final piece of the puzzle was the letter. I designed a custom Apex Property Group letterhead and drafted a 2-page masterpiece of corporate jargon and thinly veiled threats, addressed directly to Brenda Mulroney and the Willow Creek Board of Directors. It began, "Dear Board of Directors, please be advised that Apex Property Group, LLC, a firm specializing in residential real estate investment, has recently acquired the property at 124 Willow Lane as part of a broader portfolio expansion strategy in the region. Furthermore, Apex is in the advanced stages of exercising options to acquire several other properties within the Willow Creek community. This was the core lie, but it was plausible. Investment firms do this all the time. It went on. Our preliminary due diligence, which included a thorough review of the association's governing documents, financials, and recent board actions, has revealed several areas of significant concern. These include, but are not limited to, potential breaches of fiduciary duty, patterns of selective enforcement, and inconsistent application of stated rules, which may expose the association to significant legal and financial liability. I listed the tree incident as Case Study A, Inequitable, Application of Common Area Maintenance Responsibilities. The parking issue became Case Study B, Extra Legal Interpretation of Vehicle. Classifications: the welcome mat, the hose, the blinds, the wind chime. I listed them all in cold, analytical terms, complete with dates and rule citations. I didn't ask them to drop the fines. I stated with chilling finality, Apex Property Group formally disputes the legality of all outstanding fines associated with this property and will not be remitting payment, as they appear to be arbitrary, capricious, and levied in bad faith. And then, the knockout punch, aimed directly at their biggest fear. Given the identified risks to property values and the potential for severe legal exposure, Apex Property Group is preparing to engage directly with other homeowners to discuss all available remedies. These remedies include, but are not limited to, the initiation of a special meeting for the purpose of recalling the current board of directors. Recalling the board is a real process, outlined in their own bylaws. It's an HOA board's worst nightmare, a public vote of no confidence that could get them all thrown out in disgrace. I signed it Senior Acquisitions Manager, Apex Property Group, and sent it via certified mail with a return receipt requested. The wait was agonizing. For 3 days, there was total silence. I could just imagine the panicked phone calls and frantic emails flying between Brenda and the other board members. Then, the green certified mail receipt came back in the mail, bearing Brenda Mulroney's own signature. She got it. The trap was set. The first sign it was working was an email from the HOA's management company, not Brenda. The tone was a complete 180 from anything I had received before. It was cautious, respectful, almost scared. Dear Apex Property Group, it began. We are in receipt of your letter dated date. The Board of Directors would like to schedule a conference call to discuss your concerns at your earliest convenience. I let the email sit for a full day before replying curtly. A phone call is insufficient for a matter of this gravity. We will address this at the next scheduled board meeting. Please ensure our matter is placed on the agenda and that sufficient time is allotted for a thorough discussion. I was calling the shots now. I wanted this confrontation to happen in public, in front of the other homeowners who were too afraid to speak up. The night of the HOA meeting was electric. I walked into that same sterile clubhouse, but this time I wasn't just some homeowner they could shout down. I was the Senior Acquisitions Manager for Apex Property Group. I wore my best dark suit, one I usually reserved for weddings and funerals. I carried a black leather portfolio containing nothing but a copy of my letter and their own highlighted financial statements. Brenda and the board were already there. They looked physically sick. When the meeting started, Brenda's usual iron grip was gone. Her voice was shaky and quiet. She raced through the old business until she got to the new agenda item. New business, correspondence from Apex Property Group. We have a representative here from a new ownership group, she stammered, gesturing vaguely in my direction. They have some concerns they wish to discuss. I stood up. The room, filled with about 30 homeowners, went silent. I walked to the front and stood beside the table, but I didn't sit. I spoke in a calm, measured, corporate monotone that I had perfected over years of tough negotiations. Good evening. I'm here on behalf of Apex Property Group. As you know from our letter, we have acquired an interest in this community. And frankly, we're alarmed by what we've found. I laid it all out. Not with emotion, but with cold, hard business logic. The inconsistent rules, the made-up violations, the harassment of residents, which I termed a potential source of liability. I mentioned the phrase breach of fiduciary duty 5 times. I talked about the direct financial risk to every homeowner in the room, the skyrocketing insurance premiums, and the potential for a class action lawsuit that would drain their already thin bank account and send their insurance rates through the roof, resulting in a special assessment for everyone. I never raised my voice. I just stated facts. One of the board members, a nervous-looking guy named Gary, tried to push back. "Now hold on. You can't just come in here and—" I cut him off, not with words, but just by holding up a hand and fixing him with a dead-eyed stare. "Gary, is it?" "Gary, let me be perfectly clear. Apex isn't here to argue. We are here to protect our investment. Your board's current management style represents a material risk to that investment. A single lawsuit, a single court finding that you've acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner could be devastating for this community's finances. Is your D&O insurance carrier prepared for that? Have you read the exclusion clauses in your policy related to willful misconduct?" The color drained from his face. The other board members stared at Brenda, who looked like she'd swallowed a wasp. Then a homeowner in the back, a woman who'd given me a sympathetic look at the last meeting, spoke up. Her voice was trembling but clear. "He's right," she said. "They fined me last month because my garden gnome was not an approved landscape feature. It was a gift from my granddaughter," another man chimed in, suddenly emboldened. "They tried to fine me for my son's basketball hoop that we've had for 5 years, calling it a temporary structure. It was like a dam had broken." The fear that Brenda had cultivated for years was washing away in a sudden, powerful flood of homeowner outrage. The room erupted with similar stories of petty fines and harassment. Brenda banged her gavel weakly on the table, a pathetic thud on the formica. "Order! This is not a free-for-all!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. I stepped in one last time, my voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "Brenda, this isn't a free-for-all. This is a reckoning. Apex Property Group has a simple, non-negotiable proposal. 1. You will immediately rescind all outstanding fines and violations against the property at 124 Willow Lane. 2. The board will issue a formal, written apology to the resident, Ms. Sarah Collins, for the pattern of harassment she has endured. 3. The board will send out a community-wide notice clarifying the policies on common area maintenance, personal vehicles, and decorative items, strictly adhering to the written CC&Rs, not personal interpretation. You do that, and Apex will, for now, put a hold on exploring its other options. You have 48 hours to provide written confirmation of your full compliance." I slowly packed my empty portfolio, gave a slight, dismissive nod to the stunned and shattered board, and walked out without another word, leaving behind the smoldering ruins of Brenda's petty kingdom. The bluff was out there, bigger and bolder than I ever imagined. Now I just had to see if they'd fold. Those next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I had gone all in on a hand that was mostly courage and a few well-placed lies. My bluff could still be called. The HOA could have their lawyer spend 30 minutes online and find out that Apex Property Group, LLC, was a brand-new entity that owned a single townhouse and had no options on any others. The whole thing could blow up in my face, leaving me exposed, humiliated, and in a far worse position than before. But I was betting on a simple principle. Bullies are cowards at heart. Their fear was bigger than their courage, and their arrogance was bigger than their budget. They were afraid of lawsuits, afraid of being personally liable, and now they were afraid of their own neighbors. On the second day, late in the afternoon, an email with the subject line "Board Response to Apex Property Group" hit my inbox. It was from the HOA's management company, with 2 PDFs attached. My hand was literally shaking as I moved the cursor to click them open. The first was a formal letter on HOA letterhead. It stated that after a thorough review of the issues raised, all outstanding fines and violations against my property were being rescinded, effective immediately. It went on to include a stiff but official apology addressed to my tenant, Sarah, for the misunderstandings and communication issues that had occurred. The second document was a draft of a newsletter that was being prepared for distribution to the entire community. It had two big, bolded sections. One clarified, in no uncertain terms, that the HOA was solely responsible for the maintenance of all trees and landscaping in designated common areas. The other spelled out the exact, narrow definition of a commercial vehicle as written in the CC&Rs, explicitly stating that standard personal pickup trucks without commercial markings were not in violation. It also included a softer policy on approved decorative items, focusing on safety rather than aesthetics. I had won a total, unconditional, and frankly, unbelievable victory. I immediately forwarded the documents to Sarah. A minute later, my phone rang. She was crying, but this time they were tears of pure relief. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I really can't. I can finally just live here. I don't have to be scared every time I walk out my front door." Hearing the weight lift from her voice was more satisfying than any financial gain. A week later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Brenda Mulroney had abruptly resigned as HOA president and from the board entirely, citing personal reasons. The board was temporarily taken over by Gary, the nervous guy who had tried to challenge me. Apparently, without Brenda's domineering presence, he was a much more reasonable and consensus-driven person. The entire atmosphere of the community began to change almost overnight. The next weekend, I drove through Willow Creek. Sarah had put her original, non-compliant welcome mat back out. Her Ford F-150 was parked proudly in her driveway, and on the back patio, visible from the street, was a riot of colorful sidewalk chalk art, courtesy of Lily. Peace and a little bit of personality had been restored. My little investment property went back to being just that, a quiet, steady investment. And Apex Property Group, LLC? I filed the paperwork to have it dissolved a few weeks later. Its glorious and very short mission was accomplished. Looking back, the lesson from this whole insane saga is clear. Sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully who hides behind rules is to be smarter, bolder, and more prepared than they are. HOAs can feel like an unstoppable, faceless force, but they are almost always run by fallible people, and they are bound by their own documents and their own fears. By understanding their weaknesses, using their own rules against them, and having the sheer guts to pull off a crazy, meticulously planned bluff, I took back control. It was a wild, stressful ride that I wouldn't wish on anyone, but the profound satisfaction of seeing justice served and protecting a good person and my family's future was worth every single second of it. So that's my story of landlord versus the HOA from hell. I know I'm not the only one with a story like this. What's the most absurd rule your HOA has ever tried to enforce? Drop your own horror stories in the comments below. Let's compare notes. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more.